You grew up with a story whispered into your ears from the moment you could understand words. That women were divine, that their hearts were sacred vessels of warmth, of healing, of unconditional love. That they were your missing half, your balance, your answer. And so you looked for her everywhere. The muse, the angel, the soft voice that would soothe the chaos inside you. But what if I told you that wasn't love? What if it was a myth? Not just false, but designed. A polished illusion crafted to control not through violence, but through need. And you, like most men, walked straight into it, willingly, because it felt good, because it gave you purpose, because it made your pain poetic. She was everything. And you were the one who chased, who protected, who fell to his knees in devotion. You were taught that this was strength. But what if that was never strength? What if it was surrender disguised as romance? Aristotle didn't sugarcoat it. He didn't dress femininity in sonnets or worship it like a divine enigma. He called it what it was, a deviation from the male. Not in spirit, but in form. A biological divergence, not a moral failure. Nature, he believed, didn't lie. It didn't flatter. It functioned. And function, as cold as it sounds, tells a different story about love. Because love, real, raw love, is rarely mutual. It's rarely equal. What if what you call being in love is nothing more than a beautiful hierarchy, devotion wrapped around dependence? You kneel, you offer, you confess. But she adapts. She listens not with empathy, but with strategy. She sees your craving, your hunger for approval, and she reflects it. Not to heal it, to harness it. That softness you adore, sometimes it's real, but often it's performance. Not always malicious, but almost always deliberate. Because in a world built for men, a woman survives by becoming what he needs. Not because she's weak, not because she's false, but because she learned early her power lies not in domination, but in reflection. She mirrors your dreams, your hopes, your illusions. She gives just enough for you to believe. Not too much to make you feel safe. Just enough to keep you chasing. You think you're being loved, but really you're being calibrated. And this is where it stings. This is where you want to look away. Because if that's true, then everything you thought was mutual was never mutual. Everything you thought was connection was compliance. Everything you offered was data. She registers it all. Your tone, your silence, your hesitation. Like code. Because when you don't have structural power, you master subtlety. And women? They've mastered subtlety. You call it emotion. It's analysis. You think she's nurturing, she's adapting. You think she's overwhelmed, she's calculating. Not because she's cold, not because she's evil, but because she had to be precise. She had to become indispensable, not loud, not obvious, essential. The voice in your head, the comfort after the fall, the one who knew exactly what to say and when. And you? You thought that was love. But was it? Or was it obedience wrapped in affection? Was it chemistry or control? You didn't fall in love. You fell into orbit. Around her attention, around her moods, around her needs. You stopped existing outside of her gaze. You gave her your strength, hoping for approval. You silenced your instincts in exchange for validation. And she didn't have to dominate you. She just had to become your emotional oxygen. And she did. So when she pulls back, and she will, you feel like you're suffocating. But it's not because she's gone. It's because you no longer see yourself. Because you never saw yourself. You only ever saw who you were through her eyes. And now you're hollow. Now you're broken. Not because she left, but because your reflection left with her. You keep telling yourself she changed, that she used to care, that she used to be soft, that she used to look at you like you were her world. But maybe, just maybe, she didn't change. Maybe the performance ended. Because here's the hardest truth to hold in your chest. She was never in love with you. Not the way you thought. She was in tune with you, with your needs, with your insecurities, with your craving to be needed. And she became the answer to that craving. Not because she was manipulative, but because it's how she survives. In a world where men build systems, women learn to build survival. You were out there conquering careers, status, battles of ego and power. She was learning how to become your sanctuary, not by chance, by instinct. She didn't want to conquer your body. She wanted to conquer your mind. And the way in was through the story you told yourself about her. The muse, the angel, the healer. But that story was never hers. It was yours. And she simply played the role. Because when a man gives a woman a script and she follows it, she gains power without ever needing to ask for it. Why would she dismantle the illusion that makes her essential? Why would she destroy the pedestal that gives her control without confrontation? You called it femininity. She called it adaptation. You called it chemistry. She called it leverage. Because when you don't have force, you master finesse. And here's where the illusion goes from subtle to surgical. She doesn't argue. She doesn't fight. She just adjusts. She doesn't demand obedience. She inspires it, quietly, invisibly. Her softness isn't surrender. It's strategy. And the things you thought made her fragile, they were tools, masterfully deployed. Every time she cried, it wasn't always pain. Every time she pulled away, it wasn't always hurt. Sometimes it was calibration. Sometimes it was a test. Sometimes it was a shift in rhythm, designed to bring you closer, to make you question, to make you need her again. Because when she knows what makes you hesitate, she knows how to keep you loyal. You thought she needed your protection. She needed your pattern. Because whoever understands the rhythm of your emotions controls when to play them. You call it love. But is it? Or is it choreography? Every smile, every silence, every subtle glance, intentional. Every compliment, measured. Every, I love how honest you are. A probe. She wasn't overwhelmed. She was observing. She wasn't confused. She was collecting data. Because in a world that constantly devalues the feminine, she found power in precision. And you became the instrument she learned how to play with finesse. But don't hate her for it. She didn't start the game. She just learned to master it. Because when survival is the goal, intimacy becomes a tool. And when you realized this, when it started to dawn on you, that maybe she never saw you as a man, but as a resource, it shattered you. Because all along, you were giving. And she was storing. Your vulnerability, archived. Your fears, memorized. Your wounds, labeled, not for cruelty, but for control. Not because she's evil, but because that's how you survive when you're not the default. And so here you are, alone, empty. Not because she broke you, but because the mirror she held up is gone. And without it, you don't know who you are anymore. Because the truth that nobody talks about, the betrayal you can't say out loud, is that she never saw you as strong. She saw you as moldable. Not because you were weak, but because you wanted to be loved more than you wanted to be seen. You wanted approval more than truth. You were a project, a pattern to be understood. And once she cracked the code, once she knew what to reflect, what to echo, what to withhold, you mistook that for love. And now that she's gone, you're not grieving her. You're grieving the man you thought you were in her presence, the mask you wore to keep her close. And now that the performance is over, you're standing in the wreckage. Not of a relationship, but of your delusion. You thought she completed you. She only completed the illusion. And yet this isn't the end. This is the beginning. So now, the mirror is gone. The reflection has vanished. And for the first time, you're left staring at something you've been avoiding your entire life. Yourself. No more performance. No more emotional feedback loops. No more illusion that love will make you whole. Just silence. But in that silence, there's something sacred, something clean, something terrifyingly real. It's your beginning. The truth is, you never really loved her. You loved the way she made you feel, the way her attention quieted your chaos, the way her presence gave your life shape. You loved being chosen. You loved outsourcing your worth. You loved the emotional oxygen she gave you every time you doubted yourself. But that was never her responsibility. You used her. Not in the way people think. Not with cruelty, but with expectation. You made her your meaning. You made her your morality. You made her the audience for a performance you didn't even know you were giving. And now she's gone. And you're not heartbroken. You're exposed. And that exposure, it burns. Because you've never built your identity on your own terms. You've always measured yourself through someone else's eyes. So now it's time. Time to stop chasing reflections and start building reality. Because here's the real liberation. She was never supposed to complete you. She was never your redeemer. She was never your savior. She was just a mirror. A sharp, strategic, adaptive mirror. And when the mirror breaks, you get a chance to see what you truly are. Without distortion, without flattery, without fantasy. And if that vision is painful, if it feels like nothing's left, good. That's your foundation. You don't need her gaze to validate your existence. You don't need her warmth to justify your kindness. You don't need her softness to prove your masculinity. You're not here to perform. You're here to be. And when you truly become, fully, honestly, unapologetically, you become sovereign. Not a reaction, not a projection, a man. And when that happens, everything shifts. She will feel it. She'll test it. She may leave. She may try to drag you back into the old roles, the pleasing, the chasing, the apologizing. But if you stay centered, if you don't flinch, if you meet her gaze without needing her approval, something radical becomes possible. Not romance as you knew it, not passion rooted in pain, Not intimacy fueled by dependency, but truth. Truth that doesn't seek control. Truth that doesn't need choreography. Truth that stands on its own. And maybe, just maybe, you'll meet someone there. Not a goddess, not a mirror, but a woman. Real, unfiltered, unafraid. And for the first time, you won't need her to be pure. You won't need her to be soft. You won't need her to be anything but real. Because you'll be real too. And two real people, they don't orbit, they meet. They don't perform, they connect. They don't kneel, they stand side by side. But none of that can happen if you don't let the illusion die. So let it die. Let it burn. Let the myth collapse. Let the fairy tale drown in its own sentimentality and rise. Rise as someone who no longer fears the absence of her gaze. Rise as someone who no longer trades truth for comfort. Rise as someone who doesn't need to be needed to feel whole. Because only then, only when you've stripped away every false story, can you truly love and be loved as you are. If this shattered something inside you, if it broke the spell, don't run from it. Sit in it. Feel the silence. Honor the grief, not of losing her, but of losing the man you never were. Then build, from the ground up, not for her, not for anyone, for you. Because the only love worth having is the one that meets you at your center, not the one that pulls you off it.